I call Julianne Genter.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I rise in support, to speak in support, at least at this first reading, of the Credit Contracts and Financial Services Law Reform Bill on behalf of the Green Party. And the Green Party has been very enthusiastic about this bill coming before the House. I'm glad that we've finally gotten to the first reading. It was first introduced in April, and one would hope that, given what appears to be broad cross-party support across the House, that and given the dire need for this legislation, that the government could have prioritised it a little bit better. I have to congratulate the officials from the Ministry of Consumer Affairs who've been working on this for many, many years. It appears that the work in this area first commenced in 2007. And this regulatory impact statement was dated October 2011, which is nearly 2 years ago. And it will hopefully provide some protection for the most vulnerable in our society and provide a better regulation of what is known as the third-tier lending operators. And the lending practices of such credit providers can result in some people getting into severe financial hardship and spiraling debt. And that is a major social problem. It's a major economic problem. And it has serious costs and implications not only for the affected individual, but for their families and for the communities and for wider society. And I just have to say that it's the excellent aims of this bill, which are essentially to ensure that there's a responsible lending framework and protection for vulnerable consumers, really need to be considered within the wider policy context of this government, who are relentlessly pursuing an agenda of increasing inequality by protecting the privilege of their mates, by looking after big corporate rent seekers, oligopolies, monopolies, and undermining the rights and protections of workers with the Employment Relations Amendment Bill. We have to understand that one of the factors that's driving the need for some people to look for this short-term credit is low income. And I'd note the Families Commission released a report in 2012 called Pacific Families and Problem Debt, and they conclusively found that low income was one of the factors contributing to financial strain in Pacific families. And the reasons given for borrowing from fringe lenders were for eminently understandable needs. So 44% of Pacific families who'd gone to fringe lenders were looking for, they needed it to pay for essential items, 36% to pay for other loans and debts. And that's the vast majority of families who were having to go to these dodgy lenders were doing so because they couldn't meet their basic needs, and just going for something like a short-term loan of $800 in one case spiraled out of control to a debt of $70,000. And that is completely ridiculous and unacceptable. It's unacceptable that some families who are struggling to get by because of policies and the global context, which tend to make, that have seen low wage growth over the past few decades, they're going to these short-term lenders out of desperation. They're being targeted by unscrupulous lenders in many cases who have a deliberate business plan, which is to take advantage of people who don't have much, who desperately need money, and who don't understand the implications of 2% daily interest rates. And it's completely unacceptable that families who are struggling, who are working hard, and who are simply trying to pay for essential items should find themselves in a situation of spiraling out of control debt. And it's not good for them. It's not good for wider society. And I just think it's important that while the steps being taken by the government are welcome, they have taken quite a long time. And in the meantime, since this regulatory impact statement was written in October 2011, we had an election. We had the introduction of legislation for the mixed ownership model, which was a flagship policy of this government, which was essentially to sell off or partially privatize publicly owned assets, selling them to people who already have quite a good deal of wealth. They have money sitting aside that they can afford to invest in these companies. They are going to be earning returns, potentially, that otherwise would have come to the government and to taxpayers. So what we see here is, instead of prioritizing legislation and a framework to deal with a serious problem that's affecting our most vulnerable families, the government has found the time and resources to prioritize a policy that actually exacerbates the problem of wealth inequality in this country. And these things are related. It is increasing inequality because of these type of policies that are aimed at protecting the wealth and privilege of the few, that lead to a situation where families struggling to pay for essentials would potentially go and seek out some short-term relief, going to some of these unscrupulous lenders who are deliberately targeting them and aggressively advertising to them, and then find themselves in a situation of spiraling out of control debt from which they cannot recover. It's basically impossible when you get to a situation of being $70,000 in debt if one already cannot meet their needs. It's extremely difficult to get out of that situation. And so it's just interesting to see what the government actually prioritizes. And the Green Party stands for a clean, green economy that works for all New Zealanders. And the economy is just that. It is a tool that exists to serve humans. We don't exist to serve the economy. Our economic policy is based on a simple, obvious recognition of the fact that the economy is but a small subset of human society, and human society is a small subset of the natural environment. If we don't have a natural environment, if we don't look after it, if we don't ensure that we have clean water and air, a stable climate, safe food, there's no economy. We're not achieving the goal, which is human well-being and flourishing. And equally, there is no economy if we don't have a functioning and fair society. And so we cannot, in the aim of supposedly increasing economic growth, continue to trade off people and to trade off the rights of those most vulnerable to be able to earn a decent living. And while we're finally seeing, a very, very important step being taken, which is the introduction of a regulatory regime, which is going to ensure that there is responsible lending, and we welcome this. It's within the context, an overall policy context, that is actually continuing to exacerbate the problem of inequality, which is not financially, economically, or socially sustainable. I look forward to examining the detail of this bill during the Select Committee process. I'm very, very interested in finding out exactly what those affected individuals in the community think. There's been significant consultation by the government, I believe, of stakeholders, thanks to the good work of the Ministry of Consumer Affairs up until now. But it will be wonderful to be able to sit down and hear from the experts, hear from those affected most, and really delve into the detail and see if there are any opportunities to improve the bill as it's been introduced. But I can say that the Green Party welcomes this step. We're sorry it took the government so long to make it a priority. Ultimately, within the context of an economic policy that is simply looking to erode the rights of workers and fail to put in a sensible capital gains tax, we're going to continue to see increasing inequality. We're not going to see a kind of rebalancing of the economy that would ensure that those who are the most vulnerable and who have the least are actually in a position where they aren't going to be targeted by these predatory lenders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ko Kanojit Singh.